people like us. It's people like us that talk on the radio, or in this case, television. Basically, it's an attack on people like you, Matt, and people like me. They're saying the media is unfair. And in the interest of fairness, I'm going to read the statement. Is the media, quote, just going to continue running the same anonymously sourced stories every day, repackaged to avoid admitting the obvious, that over the past 2 weeks they hyped charges and allegations that Representative Gates has repeatedly denied, and there remains zero evidence of, end quote. So as I say, that's kind of hitting me, kind of hitting you, or anyone doing this work. I'm curious your response to the Gates office's view that at this point the Washington Post is pulling on the same stuff or not working with real evidence.
So look, not all of the sources in that story are anonymous, right? We talked to the teacher on the record. We talked to the teacher's lawyer on the record. We reviewed probably hundreds of pages of indictments, of police reports, of audit reports, of this county tax collector's office. You know, we did talk to some people anonymously, which we commonly do, and because of the political sensitivity of the situation, we sort of have to do that. Time will tell whether he gets charged or not. I'm not sort of drawing a conclusion there. I'm just reporting on an investigation. He says that it's going to go nowhere, and we'll see. But, you know, what we're reporting, the facts we're reporting, real, and his statement doesn't sort of contest that. It just sort of objects to the fact.
Juanita?
I don't remember.
I think what's striking about all of this, Ari, is per Matt's reporting, Greenberg lit a fire with a disgusting lie and a disgusting accusation that essentially led investigators into his own potentially criminal behavior that has resulted in, 33 federal charges. I think it's explicitly alarming that there's this foundation of his work as a tax collector to make that claim against the primary opponent, but then as you start to unravel the entire situation, pulling in someone like Representative Gates, pulling in other donors from across the state, other political appointees into this investigation who are being questioned right now. And I guess that gives the question of what is going on in Florida that this many people are being questioned by federal investigators in connection with this bigger issue that let's be real, centers on sexual trafficking and abuse of minors. And it's truly disgusting, truly troubling. As I think though it's also troubling is what we've seen from GOP members in Congress, where they might not be necessarily circling the wagons around someone like Gates, but they are not doing anything to raise further questions about his behavior, which has been reported to multiple outlets, whether it's showing indecent images on the House floor or bragging about his escapades. And so someone like Gates has been running around Congress for years now with no accountability from his own party. And I'm not shocked that we're not seeing any form of accountability now when he's under federal investigation.
I'm wondering, what do you think it says about the nature of this whole MAGA situation? Because Gates got very prominent on Fox News and being friends with the president. He's a very junior congressman. Now, he doesn't seem to be able to phone a friend for anything.
Like you said at the open, Ari, it's fully transactional. They will use you as long as you're an asset, but the moment you're not an asset, you're fine to be discarded. And so that's what I'm waiting for. When is that inflection point when we have more details coming out from this investigation? I hope it'll be before formal charges, considering that he sits on the Judiciary Committee, the committee that provides oversight for the Department of Justice, which is running this investigation. But I'm doubtful that they will do anything besides wait and see, or as McCarthy says, Gates said he's innocent, and that's enough for him right now.
Yeah, all really interesting stuff. We've been covering every aspect of it. Viewers can make up their own minds as we go. Juanita Tolliver and Matt Zapotosky kicking us off tonight. Thanks to both of you. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.
Well, what was it?
USAA paid for? It's made for him, a veteran who honorably served. And it's made for her. She's serving now. We also made USAA for military spouses and their kids. Become a member. Get an insurance quote today.
Donald Trump is under fire for conning over $100 million from his most loyal supporters. The New York Times busting his re-election campaign for a scheme mixing some of Trump's oldest con artist tricks with the desperation in a general election where he was clearly trailing Biden in the polls and in the money race. Now, this story matters for several reasons. Sure, there's the blatant hypocrisy and ethics of conning your most fervent supporters, but there's also the ongoing heat on Donald Trump's re-election effort, which ranges from those cheating allegations under criminal investigation in Georgia to the insurrection that has now open civil suits against Trump, including by police officers, to this scheme, which shows how Trump tried to make up his deficit in funding by tricking his own supporters who thought they were donating once to then be suckered into donations that were double, triple, or over 5 times the original when they became monthly. The Trump campaign using this money bomb strategy to bilk people in the campaign's final weeks. And the campaign then spun those donations, which basically skirt the line of fraudulent inducement, into a narrative of, they claim, public success. They even bragged they got a record $14 million in donations after the first so-called money bomb. The campaign was so desperate, it took the con to very blatant lengths, automatically rolling donors into weekly recurring donations, which ensured that way more MAGA fans would notice, and they did. And they accused their beloved president of overseeing a fraudulent operation, which forced Trump and the RNC to refund over $122 million. You can see there when they started the tactic and how it soared to have these demanded refunds, and it's over 6 times the rate of the Biden campaign. Now, we can take this story in tonight, and what do we have here? Donald Trump announces a big new project, and he touts his own skills for winning and making money. Then he uses the very people who believe in him to take or steal their money.
I would say you are.
When the project fails, he runs off, leaving them to have to work to get their money back from him. And some do, others don't. So he still manages to hold on to some money that he took from people who, of course, have far less money than him.
I don't know.
If it sounds familiar, almost exhaustingly so, it's literally the playbook for the now infamous Trump University, which, remember, was a business that gave out business advice which went out of business. Embarrassing. And like so many cons, it didn't prey on Donald Trump's critics or his detractors or the journalists he wants to give a hard time. No, it focused squarely on the people who like Trump enough to become his own financial
I'm getting my
friend.
break, and it feels normal. I'm gonna hate
At
it
Trump
again.
University, we
I'm gonna
teach
hate it again.
success. That's what it's all about. We're going to teach you better
really
than the
long
business school's
break.
going to teach you. I think the
Every
biggest
couple
step
years.
towards success
5 years,
is
4
going
years.
to be sign up at Trump University.
Students say Trump University didn't deliver.
Listen,
Today,
okay.
walking away with a $25 million settlement, the university used high-pressure sales tactics and never taught real estate success.
Trump U went bust, just like the Trump re-election campaign. Now, while Trump lied and he claimed he'd never pay those students back, as you saw reported there, he ultimately was forced to in court for $25 million. Just as the New York Times reports, this scheme finally ended with Trump and co. forking back over $100 million. And with Trump, some of the people in the most danger are his loyalists because, well, that's how these cons work. To paraphrase Stephen Stills, with con artists, they always con the one you're with. And this is broader than just those people because Trump used this trick to basically get around campaign finance rules with a $100 million cash infusion in the very campaign home stretch when every dollar counted and he and Biden were at times seemingly in a close race in many states. And so, as with so many other things over these past 4 years, the question is not only just about what happened, but whether the nation and our rules and laws want to do anything to prevent this type of thing from ever happening again. We have 2 special guests tonight to dig into this and the implications. We're joined by Max Booth, Washington Post columnist with Republican experience in the party pre-Trump, and Joan Walsh, national affairs correspondent for The Nation. Good to have you both here.
Thanks, Art.
Joan, I quote Stephen Stills with no disrespect to the transmutation of the original song because it is dangerous to be a Trump supporter. It is actually dangerous to your pocketbook and a lot more, whether you realize it or not. And so, what do you make of just the sheer scale of this fraudulence? And then what about the fact that you can even do this in American politics? Is that fair? Is that a good idea?
It's not fair. It's not a good idea. We all know that, is sitting here.
but I just have to say, this makes me so relieved that he's gone, Ari, because I could actually feel outrage at this story. Whereas I fear that 6 months ago it would have been another case of, well, what do you expect? Condom on your with, Trump University, nothing matters. And I think this will matter. I mean, it does matter. Just ethically, it matters. And it matters also as the Republican Party is making this alleged turn to embrace its blue-collar roots. We need to call out at every moment that they have this blue-collar set of lies, but they're always scamming blue-collar people. And, you know, as a reporter, and I know you felt the same way, when you read a story that starts with someone in hospice care being scammed out of his money and he dies before he can get it back, that's a really good story, both as a narrator and also as a truth teller. It's abysmal, it's disgusting, it's also not terribly surprising, but we still have to be outraged.
Max?
Yeah, I mean, that's completely right. On one level, it is shocking and horrific, but on another level, what do you expect? To me, what is the most shocking and horrific thing here is that Donald Trump has been at this for so long. We all know his game. I mean, you think about how many exposés have been published about what Trump is up to. They were published before he became president, while he was president. They've been published since he became president. None of it makes any difference. There was just a new poll that came out in the last day showing that 80% of Republicans continue to approve of Donald Trump. And I can guarantee you, even if you force-fed every single Republican in America to read this New York Times expose of his shoddy, unethical fundraising tactics, it would not make one iota of difference. It would not dent his support. As he so famously said, he could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and it wouldn't make any difference. So, you know, in some ways, he is truly the most successful con artist in American history because it doesn't matter that his con is exposed. It's exposed repeatedly, and he maintains his support. I mean, the level of fallibility and cult-like following he has built is truly something with very little precedent in American history. It's deeply troubling, and it suggests he could actually stage a comeback in the next election.
Okay, let me just say, Max knows way more about this than I do, about this party, than I do. But I just want to say, at some point, he had like 95 or 97% Republican support. So getting down to 80% is progress. We've really got to appreciate, we've got to take the small wins. We've got to appreciate the progress when it's made. And I don't know, I've said this so many times before, so I hate to say it again, but I do have to feel like somebody in hospice care who loved this president and got scammed by him and his relatives and the other people in that story, and then the many, many people who were not in that story, who were telling their friends and looking, and now perhaps going back to credit card statements because they weren't entirely on top of it and being like, oh my God, this happened to me too. I don't know. I keep holding out hope that we're going to get we got the 95 down to 80 and we're going to get the 80 down to 55?
75%.
I don't know. Okay, all right. I'll take it.
Max is shaking his head, and we welcome dialogue here, Max. So go ahead and explain your disagreement.
This is just, we have just seen that Trump's cult following will not desert him even after he's presided over 400,000 COVID deaths during his last year in office and the storming of the U.S. Capitol. In fact, this recent poll just showed that more than half of Republicans blame Antifa for what happened on January 6th. So this is a party that is incendiary, the better. This is a lot of what's driven the Republican Party to the right. Mickey Edwards, who was a longtime Republican congressman from Oklahoma, founded CPAC, founded the Heritage Foundation. He had a great expose on this in the Bulwark about a month ago where he talked about how in the 1980s his consultants working for him, his fundraisers, were always trying to put in these culture war pitches into their fundraising letters because that's what got the cash registers ringing. And he would always take them out. He said, no, I'm not about culture war, I'm about lower taxes. I'm about being strong in defense. Those are my issues. But the culture war issues have won. And a lot of the reason they won is because they get the money. They loosen people's wallets. That's why the Republicans are in a froth about Dr. Seuss. That's why they're in a froth about the All-Star Game. These are the things that excite donors and get them to part with their money. And so, you know, Trump is basically didn't invent this scam. He has merely perfected it and taken it to new levels of unethical conduct.
Well, you're really talking about the part that carries over, and John, let me bring you in, but just to Max's point, you know, this goes to that question of who is really running the priorities, right? And Max, I know you once upon a time advised Romney and others on policy, but it seems that there isn't even a pretense, Joe, of people getting up and talking about policy on the right, whatever it might be. Whether you look at the example of the literally not putting out a policy platform for the first time in the modern era under Trump, because you didn't need to, because policy wasn't important, to the dog whistles, the racism, the examples for fundraising were there. And John, I guess that goes to, we're hearing now from John Boehner, who's not a very credible person on this, but who's now saying, oh gosh, you know, we just couldn't even keep the party together anymore because it was all about these base issues. And the last point I'll make on that, Joan, is the group company that was working hand in glove with Trump on this was just another for-profit company. They didn't care one way or the other. They're just trying to get a commission of every tricked out every trick that gets a fundraising donation, Joan.
Right, and they did this raising money for other Republicans. You know, Max is absolutely right. This is where policy just went away because policy, lower tax rates,